Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. If you have an aging senior in your life, you've likely noticed a few changes in their lifestyle or behavior. Whether your loved one is struggling with sight or hearing, or has been diagnosed with a disease like Parkinson's, watching a loved one age can feel scary and even bewildering. In our line of work, we've seen families face a wide variety of unpredictable changes with their aging loved ones. There are certain experiences that have been especially difficult for families to not only handle, but actually make sense of. One of these experiences is known as Sundown Syndrome. Sundown Syndrome is a phenomenon that can occur in people with Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. It occurs when seniors experiencing these diseases undergo big behavioral changes at night or in the evening as the sun goes down. For many families, Sundown Syndrome can be confusing and even heartbreaking to witness. Often, families don't understand why this is happening. Their loved one might act completely normally during the day, just to become greatly disturbed or disoriented at night. If the senior hasn't already been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, the family might be at a loss to understand why this is happening. After all, Sundown Syndrome isn't one of the better known or obvious symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Still, it's important that families and caregivers are aware of the symptoms and signs of Sundown Syndrome so that they can recognize it if or when it happens. At the same time, if Sundown Syndrome is something you're already facing with the senior in your life, it can be enormously helpful to learn more about the condition and its treatment, so you can be as informed and prepared as possible for any difficult nights in the future. That's why today's episode of All Home Care Matters is all about Sundown Syndrome. We'll dive into what Sundown Syndrome is, why it occurs, and the signs and symptoms to look out for. Then we'll go into how you can help your loved one manage their symptoms. Sundown Syndrome is not easy for any family or senior to face. So we'll also talk about coping mechanisms that can help to calm tough situations before they get any worse. Let's get started. If a senior is experiencing Sundown Syndrome, this means that their behavior is changing drastically once the sun sets. While that might be acting completely normally during the day, nightfall can bring unpredictable changes in mood, personality, and more. For some seniors, sundowning means agitation or restlessness. Others feel delusional, confused, or even disoriented. Some even experience hallucinations. We'll go over the symptoms in detail later on, but first let's find out what sundowning really is and why it happens in the first place. Sundowning typically begins right around dinner time and can continue until the sun comes up the next day. This means a long night for sundowning seniors and their caregivers and families. Researchers believe that this timing is no coincidence. While no one is entirely sure why sundowning occurs, experts believe that it has something to do with Alzheimer's affecting a person's circadian rhythms. All people have something called circadian rhythms, which are basically our eternal clocks. These rhythms tell us when to wake up and when to go to sleep. Disruptions in our circadian rhythms can be extremely jarring and lead to changes in behavior. Have you ever had jet lag that put you in a particularly irritable mood? Sundowning is sort of like that, but much more extreme. Because in Alzheimer's patients, it's not just a time zone that's affecting that internal clock. For people with Alzheimer's, the part of your brain that signals when you're awake and when you're asleep completely breaks down. About 1 in 5 people with Alzheimer's or other types of dementia experience sundowning. Rarely, sundowning can occur in seniors who do not have dementia. Researchers are not sure why this phenomenon occurs in only a small percentage of patients, but there are certain commonalities in patients with sundowning that can point to some potential causes. A senior might be more likely to face sundown syndrome if they are tired, depressed, struggling with sleep issues, hungry or thirsty, in pain, or even bored. Other seniors can be triggered by a lack of light in the house, which can lead to fear or anxiety, long shadows, or the inability to separate dreams from reality. Some seniors who have an infection or are recovering from a surgery or illness may also experience sundown syndrome. According to WebMD, some seniors are even triggered by their caregiver's behavior. If they notice that their caregiver is frustrated or irritable at the end of the day, they can become upset and experience sundown syndrome. Of course, caregivers are bound to get frustrated from time to time, especially at the end of a long and tiring day. That's why it's so important for caregivers to practice self-care and emotion management. Listen to our episode, Caring for the Caregiver, to learn more about how you can cope with the difficult days and make sure you're getting the support and care you need too. There are certain signs and symptoms to look out for when it comes to sundown syndrome. Again, it's important for caregivers and families alike to learn to recognize these symptoms so they know right away when an episode is occurring. Now, it's important to note that signs and symptoms can vary widely. Still, there are certain signs that are particularly common. These include rapid mood changes, and by rapid, I mean your loved one can go from 0 to 10 in the span of one dinner. These mood changes are likely to be jarring for caregivers and family members because they'll basically come out of nowhere. Other common signs include anxiety or fear. Again, this can come out of seemingly nowhere as well. Agitation and restlessness, anger, stubbornness, sadness, and repetition. You might notice that when night comes, your loved one becomes irritated over the seemingly smallest things. Something that made your loved one laugh only an hour earlier might make them shout in anger now. These mood swings can be extremely difficult to manage, and you might find that attempts to calm your loved one only exacerbates their behavior. Less common but still noteworthy symptoms include hallucinating, paranoia, violence, wandering, and hiding, whether seniors are hiding themselves or random objects throughout the house. The behavior can be unpredictable, surprising, and hard to control. Again, these behavioral changes will vary depending on the person, and many of them, like anger, sadness, and anxiety, will manifest itself differently in different people. The AARP describes what these mood changes might actually look like, explaining that challenging behaviors might include pacing, rocking, screaming, crying, disorientation, resistance, anger, aggression, or even violence. Many people experiencing sundown syndrome feel the urgent need to go somewhere or do something, but they can't always explain why. In our experience working with families, we have known many who have faced sundown syndrome. In one case, a senior had a terrible time with severe hallucinations. She acted entirely normal during the day, but at night she believed that people were breaking into her home. She called 911 on more than one occasion, prompting the police to demand that she be seen by a doctor. Because these hallucinations only occurred at night, the family had no idea why they were happening or what caused them. It was incredibly heartbreaking, confusing, and even scary. At the time, they had no idea that their loved one had Alzheimer's. While sundown syndrome can occur in any stage of Alzheimer's, it's not entirely uncommon for it to be the first major sign of Alzheimer's disease. Unfortunately, most families have never heard of this syndrome and therefore don't identify it as a sign of Alzheimer's. This is another reason it's so important to know and understand these symptoms. The sooner a diagnosis of Alzheimer's can be given, the better. If you notice that your loved one is experiencing any of the symptoms of sundown syndrome, be sure to take them to the doctor as soon as possible. Many patients do not experience sundown syndrome until further into their Alzheimer's diagnosis, however. An AARP writer named Amy Goyer, for instance, writes that her father did not have sundown syndrome until the moderate stage of Alzheimer's. At that point, questions or observations that were occasional for most of the day, what's the plan, what should I be doing, and we better get going, got more frequent and more urgent around 5 or 6 in the evening. Still, Goyer's family was able to help her father manage these symptoms. She writes that as his disease progressed, his sundowning actually became less frequent, much thanks to the management techniques that were regularly practiced in the household. That brings us to our next point. How do we help the seniors in our life manage their sundowning symptoms? If the symptoms can be controlled, it would save both ourselves and our loved one a whole lot of heartache, frustration, and exhaustion. Goyer recommends you start by watching for and tracking sundowning triggers. Whether it's fatigue, hunger, or shadows, try to make a note of the factors that might be at play before an attack. Pay attention to the time of day that sundown syndrome usually occurs as well. If the syndrome begins around 7 each night, take note of what's happening in the house at that time. Does the sun leak through the window at the perfect angle to make long shadows throughout the house? Is dinner being served? Are family members returning home from work, disrupting a nice quiet day? Once you know the triggers, you can do what you can to prevent them. If you know shadows play a major role, you can make sure to shut the blinds in the early evening. If you know hunger plays a role, you can make sure your loved one always has a snack. Preventing the triggers before they happen can keep a sundown attack from happening altogether. Many seniors struggle with sleeping, and an irregular sleeping schedule can be a big trigger for sundown syndrome. Because of this, making sure that your loved one follows a clear and consistent bedtime routine can help tremendously. This means no screens for at least an hour before bed and concluding the night with a relaxing and calming activity like a bubble bath, reading a book, or even drinking a glass of water. When it comes to the act of sleeping itself, make sure that the sleeping environment is as calm and comfortable as possible. A comfy bed, cozy pajamas, and a dark and peaceful room can go far when it comes to getting some good sleep. Use light blocking curtains to keep the room nice and dark, and make sure that the temperature isn't too hot or too cold. It should be right around 68 to 70 degrees. During the day and at night, use calming music and sounds to create an anxiety-free atmosphere in the home. Goyer suggests using upbeat music during the day to keep your loved one in a happy and stimulated mood, followed by calming music in the evenings around when the sundowning sets in. Goyer recalled that if Dad got anxious, my sister and I started singing his favorite songs and he would join in, a great diversion. Playing nature sounds like rain or ocean waves all night, or just white noise, helped him fall asleep and slumber longer. You can also try physical calming techniques to help reduce anxiety, stress, and tension. Massages, baths, and head and back scratches can make a world of difference when it comes to relaxation and stress reduction. Not only that, but simple loving touches like hugs and hand-holding can help your loved one to feel safe, secure, and loved. Along similar lines, acupuncture can actually help to combat anxiety and depression. Many seniors find that acupuncture is enormously calming and that they leave feeling much better and lighter than when they came in. Of course, you'll want to talk to your loved one's doctor before you sign up for acupuncture. Engaging your loved one's senses in a calming manner can also help to reduce stress and anxiety that might lead to sundowning. Essential oils and aromatherapy can help seniors to feel nice and relaxed, especially chamomile, lavender, and rose. Try using these at bedtime or bath time for ultimate sense relaxation. And you can also use light to help your loved one's inner clock get back on track. At nighttime, keep the home dark and shadow-free, and in the morning, place a light near your loved one before they wake up. This can help your loved one to reorient themselves to the time of day and train their inner clock to remain strong. Of course, you can also speak to your loved one's doctor about any medications that might help. A doctor might prescribe anti-anxiety, antidepressants, or sleeping pills, which can help your loved one feel like themselves again. Just be sure that the medications don't interfere with any of your loved one's other medications and that they don't have any triggering side effects like restlessness. Managing sundown syndrome will look different for every family, but if you take the necessary steps to identify any triggers and provide a safe, structured, and relaxing environment for your loved one, you'll find that this syndrome can be controlled and it doesn't always have to be the one controlling you. Still, managing these symptoms will take time. You might have to do a lot of learning through trial and error before you find something that really seems to work for your loved one. Usually a combination of most or all of the management techniques from above will make a real difference. Until you get the syndrome managed, though, you will need to help your loved one cope with it. It might seem like coping is impossible. After all, how do you get a person to cope with nightly panic attacks? You can't just stop the panic in its tracks, can you? Well, you might not be able to stop a panic attack right away, but you can do other things that will help your loved one get better. Helping them to stay active and get exercise can actually help them cope with sundowning. That's because fatigue is a common sundowning trigger, and well-exercised people tend to sleep better at night. Not only that, but physical exercise can help a senior to feel stronger, happier, and even freer, in turn reducing anxiety and personal hardship. In addition to exercise, you can help your loved one through nutrition. Try feeding your loved one many small meals throughout the day, so they are never hungry and are constantly feeling energized from the good food. Steer clear of junk food, sugars, and anything that you think might impact your loved one's mood. One of the most important things you can do during an attack is to remain patient, calm, and gentle, even as your loved one screams or carries on. If your loved one is having a hallucination, validate it instead of shutting it down. Saying no one is here might make your loved one feel lost, hurt, and even worried, which can lead to a bigger mood swing. Instead, say something like, "Yes, but they seem so nice, don't they?" before changing the subject. The best way to stop or soften hallucinations is to distract away from them. So instead of talking on and on about the hallucinations, distract your loved one by saying or doing something else to take their attention away from the hallucinations altogether. Sundown Syndrome can feel like a nightmare to many families and seniors alike, but the more prepared and informed you are, the easier it can be to manage. Remember to look out for those triggers, establish a sleep routine, and keep the house relaxing and calm throughout the evening and night. Then you should be able to return to normal nightly routines with your loved one more and more often. We want to thank you for joining us here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here for you and to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to please visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And please, if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms and watch the show on our YouTube channel. And make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We look forward to seeing you next time on All Home Care Matters when we discuss the misconceptions with assisted living. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.